Hey everyone, in this video we're going to look through all of these tools that we got in the Explore Leathercraft Kit, and I'm going to show you how to use each one of these tools and different ways to use the tools. But before we can think about tooling a piece of leather, the first thing we have to do is case it up. So this is a piece of the scrap leather that came in the kit, and casing that is just a fancy word for getting the moisture content right in there. We're going to get moisture into that leather so it can accept our tooling that we're trying to do and hold the impression in there. So there's a piece of sponge in there, and I have just a plastic dish of water. I'm going to reach in there and get a little bit of that water out and wetting this down, and you can see that color change instantly, right? And that tells you that it's getting some water in there. But how much water to put on? That's the big question, because if we get too much, then it's just really squishy and it's going to want to stretch on us really bad. So we don't want to get too much. I don't want to soak this all the way in water. I'm going to wet it down just from the top side here, and I'm looking to see how quick that water is absorbing into the leather. Now, once it's taken a second to absorb, that tells me we're getting a good amount of water in there. Okay, it's still absorbing pretty quick. So I'm going to get a little bit more water here. Put that down one more time. Okay, now that's taken a second to absorb. You see that, how long that's taken? So I'm going to set that sponge aside, and we're going to set this aside for just a minute and let it finish absorbing that water. Now we're not soaked all the way through. We're just going from that top side and getting that moisture down in there. Okay, we're going to set that aside for just a minute and let that really finish casing up. I'm going to go back to our swivel knife. Now we talked about this a little bit in the unboxing video, and I showed you kind of the introduction to all these tools and what comes in the kit, but we're going to want to strop this knife. Now that little piece of cardboard that comes in there with your knife, that's what we can use as a strop. We take our buffing compound or our jeweler's rouge and rub that on that cardboard. In my shop I always use a scrap of leather, so once you get to doing more leather work and you have some extra leather around, you can make a strop out of that. But the idea of this is to polish that blade. So I'm drawing that blade back, watching the angle of it, keeping that consistent with my strop. I don't want to roll up like that, and that'll dull the tip of that blade. So we want to keep very consistent with the angle of that blade. And I want to be consistent about how many times I'm stropping each side of that blade. So I'm turning that blade over and making sure we get both sides polished up. Now, when you first get that knife, even though we're stropped, it may drag a little bit. Once we get it in this leather, we're going to see it. I'm going to show you an insider tip on how we can get rid of that. All right, now how do you use this knife? How do we hold it? So right up here, call that the cradle or the yoke, depending on different people, they'll call it different things, but that's where we're going to put our pointer finger. Now, I'm right-handed. I use my right hand on my knife. Use what's comfortable to you. But I'm going to put that up there. Right about my first knuckle is going to go in that cradle there. And now my thumb and my middle finger are going to grab around what's called the barrel, right down here. Now you can see that swiveling because it's a swivel knife, right? That's the whole idea of why it's called that. Now my ring finger, I like keeping it right down next to that blade. To me, that helps give it a little more control. And then my pinky, I just tuck in, keep it out of the way. Now I want to keep that knife straight up and down. I don't want to be tipping side to side. That creates undercuts and things that can lift up, and we don't want that. So we're going to keep that knife straight up and down. I'm going to tip it a little bit away from me because I'm always going to be pulling that knife towards me. So I'm going to tip that up. I'm going to pull this knife towards me. So we got just the corner of that blade going down in my leather. We can turn that as we go. Now for me, this brand new knife here, it's dragging a little bit. I can feel it kind of dragging even through that good cased up leather. So this is a little insider tip for you. Something that you can do, give you a little more success right off the bat. I grabbed a piece of sandpaper here. So this is a 320 grit. Now on that knife, there's marks that are going up like this. It's because when they first do these and they sharpen them, they run it on a wheel there. We need to run those marks off there. So keeping that same angle we talked about when we're stropping, actually running that knife side to side here. And flip that over, get both sides of that blade. Now this isn't something that you have to do, but we're gonna get a lot smoother action on this blade. It's gonna get you a whole lot more success sooner off with that. So we're gonna try that. Bring our strop back out again. Now that blade should be tuned up really well. Holding that knife, finger in their cradle, fingers around the barrel. And that's already feels way better, a lot smoother. So again, tipping that knife up a little bit, pull that back to me. We can start those cuts and get them deep, our pressure going down from this finger. I can lighten that up, just lightening my pressure, and we can fade cuts out. This tool here, we're going to use that for straight lines and borders, and then in all your any floral work or pictures and things like that, we're going to use that knife a lot. So get handy with that tool. Spend some time practicing with that. Now let's move on to our other stamping tools. Now these tools here, we're going to hold these all very similar. We're going to hold those, I like my thumb on one side, my index finger, my middle finger, my ring finger kind of spaced out down that other side. I really like that ring finger close to the base, and I'll usually get that pinky out in front of that. I'm almost anchoring that leather down. I'm going to keep my hand and that pinky down on my marble or on my work surface and that leather to help it from moving around here. So you can see that kind of anchoring that down. Now, all these tools are going to be hit with our mallet, and we want to make sure that we're hitting that tool square on the top. If we're kicked off like that, it's going to want to kick your tool to the side and not work as well. So we're going to hold these straight up and down when we hit those. Now, all these different tools have different uses, so we're going to walk through each one of these and show you. This first one, this is called your bevel. And this is going to be the number BW9 when we look at that stamp on there. And you'll notice this has an angle to it. We have a flat surface on this side and an angle. So we want that flat piece, that's going to go down in a line. Holding that tool straight up and down. I'm not tipping it way far forward or back or side to side. We're keeping this straight up and down. Now you can see as I hit that next to a line, it shadows that away from there. So that's called beveling a line. And that's going to start creating depth in our tooling. Now as I hit that tool down once, now I can move it a little bit. Now, I don't want to move it all the way, I'm just going to barely walk it over there. You can see every time I'm hitting that tool, I'm moving it to the side slightly. That's going to create that nice smooth bevel line there. Things we want to avoid are moving it too far. It'll create choppiness. Tipping it as we're moving it can also create some choppiness in there as well. So keep that tool straight up and down. Move it along nice and slow. All right, moving on. Let's go to our pear shader. Now this one here is going to be BW17, BW17. And when I hit that tool straight up and down, you see it makes that pear shape shadowing in there. Now this tool we can tip a little bit. You can tip that slightly as we hit that, and we can walk this one as well, just like we did that bevel. I'm going to slowly walk that around. Now this tool can be used individually, just as we hit that, to create some texturing, or it can also be used walking that around to create some shading in a pattern. Another one we can use when we create a pattern, geometrical type patterns, we can use that tool, and we'll see that later on in some of the projects when we stamp those. Now let's come to our backgrounder. Now this tool here is going to be BW10. On the front of that one, you see we're flat across the top with some checkering on there. It's just going to add some texture. That's what we'll use to mat down a background area. So when we hit that once, you can see it just leaves a checkered dimension to it. We can fill up different areas with that background tool. And one side's a little wider, the other one's a little narrower, so that can fit into different spaces. If we wanted to fit down in between some cuts, we can do that and start pushing that background down away from us. We're going to go to what's called a cedar. This is BW14. It's a single seed at the end of this tool. We hit that one down, same thing, straight up and down, hitting square with our mallet. Oop, there we go. Get some focus on that there, and you can see the impression that that makes. This is a tool that you can use individually in some places. We can use that in when we start creating different patterns, like geometrical patterns. We can also group this together and start making different flower centers and seed clusters with it. So it's a little bit of a universal tool as well. We're down to two more here. These ones here are similar in nature, but two distinctly different tools. This first one, BW6, this is called a camouflage tool. Now, it's kind of a half round concave shape to that there. This one here we can hit straight down like that. There's your impression there. Or we can tilt this tool. We can tilt that to the right, or we can tilt that to the left, and now you're getting just the corner of that tool and the rest fades off. So we can stack that tool together, start working our way around. A lot of times if you're using this within floral work, you're going to have it tipped, either hitting to the right or to the left, or even tipping forward and creating just some texturing with that. But we can hit it straight, square, up and down, and we'll use that along a lot of areas if we're creating a border line, maybe. Creating different patterns, we'll use that tool as well. So now I said this next one was similar, but this is a different tool. This is called your veiner. So this is BW5. You can see the end of that tool, or still that concave rounded shape, but this is a lot narrower and a lot longer than the camouflage. So this one's our veiner. That veiner, again, we can hit square, right, straight up and down. That would be an application more like we were talking here if we're going to make a border line or different patterns. We might get creative with putting these together. I believe there's an example in the book where you can make a little palm tree or a turtle out of these. So you can get creative with those. But more commonly, this tool is going to be used tipped one way or the other. And again, another one that you would tip and then stack together. Now we'll get into more of the wears and wins on some of these different tools as we work through our projects, but I wanted to give you a brief demonstration on each particular tool and have a really good idea on how to run those tools. So now we can dive in on the different projects and see how to apply these and make patterns that you're proud of to give away or sell.